Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. My older sister, let's call her Maya, and our mom have always had a very difficult relationship ever since I could remember. Maya has always been headstrong and not afraid to ask questions. My mom was a very traditional, devout Christian who put family above everything first. Bit of a background. My mom was the second eldest of 9 children and moved from the Philippines to the US. She grew up dirt poor in a small province and experienced firsthand the hardship that comes with taking care of a big family. She was the first of her family to graduate college and has always valued education as a means to get out of poverty. She has paid for 4 of her siblings to go to college, only 2 actually completed and went on to find jobs, and has also paid for several of her siblings' children to go to good schools in the Philippines. Maya had more exposure to the extended family than I did. She was born in the Philippines, I was born in US, 7 years apart. As she got older, she was very outspoken about how she did not agree with my mom financially supporting some of her family because Maya felt as though they were abusing my mom's generosity, especially since mom was frugal with our expenditures here in the US. "Mom, you're working 2 jobs while Aunt Lisa is posting vacation photos from Boracay," Maya would say during one of their arguments. "How is that fair to you or to us?" Mom would sigh and shake her head. "You don't understand our culture, Maya. Family takes care of family." "But they're taking advantage of you," Maya would counter, her voice rising with frustration. When Maya was in her last year of high school, she had a bad falling out with my mom and moved out. They did not speak for 5 years, although my dad and I kept in touch with Maya. In that time, Maya worked full-time and paid her way through college without any help from my parents at all. Fast forward a few years at my high school graduation, I invited Maya, she attended, and ended up reconciling with my mom. Things were still rocky, but they had a much better relationship. In March 2023, my mom passed away. Unknown to me at the time, Maya had quietly taken over the continued financial support for my mom's youngest sisters, Elena, cost of living, and maintaining the college fund for Elena's daughter. She also took care of the funeral arrangements and handling the estate. Dad was a mess at the time. "I'm doing this for Mom," Maya told me when I finally discovered what she was doing. Not for Elena. Mom would have wanted her sister taken care of. December 2023, Maya and I decided to spend the holidays in the Philippines. One of our visits was to Elena's place. Little did I know that crap was about to hit the fan when we sat down for dinner. After small talk, the topic of my mom came up, and this was how that conversation went. Details may be lost in translation, so just writing the gist. M. Maya. E. Elena. E. Such a shame your mom passed away. We will miss her. M. Yes. E. Maya, why did you stop talking to her? Why did you leave her? You should be ashamed. That's not how you treat family. Now, your mom could have raised you better. You always were too headstrong, you know. That's not ladylike. You shouldn't be so aggressive. You need to be softer. How are you going to get a husband otherwise? M. E. And look at you now, 35 and still no children. Your mother was so disappointed. I watched Maya's jaw tighten, but she remained silent. E. Turns to me. Don't be like your sister, okay? Be a good daughter. Do you have a boyfriend yet? You don't want to get too old like Maya and not have your own family. That's not following God's plan. Before I could speak, Maya asked her own questions. M. Why did you drop out and decide to get pregnant when Mom was paying for your college? Did you really think that that businessman would leave his wife to take care of you? If you wanted to be a trophy wife, you should have just said so instead of wasting my mom's hard-earned money. At this point, I just decided to watch because Elena was starting to piss me off and Maya has been known to do epic takedowns. E. Enraged. How dare you come into my house, eat my food, and disrespect me? M. Calmly. Technically, it's my mom's house. You have food because my mom has been supporting you for the better part of 15 years, and you disrespected her by wasting all the opportunities she worked hard to give to you. E. I don't need your attitude or your bullcrap. I don't need anything from you. You disrespectful idiot. Get the hell out of my house. M. Gets up and smiles. You sure you don't need anything from me? You don't want anything from me. I want to confirm that I heard you correctly. E. I said I don't need crap from you. Who do you think you are? M. I'm the person who's been paying your bills since Mom died. E. What? No, that's your father. M. It's me, Elena, every month like clockwork. But you don't need it, right? You just said so. E. That's not what I meant. You're twisting my words. M. I don't need crap from you. I can take care of myself and my family, and how dare you imply otherwise? Get the hell out of my house and your father will hear about this. Isn't that what you just said? E. You wouldn't dare cut me off. Your mother would never forgive you. M looks at me. You heard her. Let's go. Now, I was surprised by how calmly Maya was taking the diatribe because I've seen her and my mom get into massive shouting matches. More confused than anything, I followed her to the car. M. You heard her right. She doesn't need anything from me. Me. It begins to dawn on me what my sister is about to do. Yeah. M. Okay, we get back to the hotel and my sister promptly stops the auto transfer of funds for Elena's account. We then spend the rest of the week lounging by the beach and hanging out with other cousins. So that's it? I asked her one afternoon as we sipped cocktails by the shore. You're just done with her? Maya shrugged. She made her choice. I'm respecting her independence. Yesterday, I was talking to one of my cousins and heard that Elena is just now realizing what actually happens when you run out of money. I called up Maya shortly after to give her an update. M. What? She ran out of money that quick? There was enough in there to last her the year. Me. Oh. Did you tell her that? M. Basic math. Me. Will she lose the house? M. Nah, it's paid for. As long as she doesn't do something stupid, she should have a roof over her head. Me. Did you also close her kid's college fund? M. Nope. Not gonna punish the kid for her mom's stupidity, but that's all she gets, so if she ducks it up, she ducks it up. Me. Has she tried to contact you at all? M. Oh, about 50 missed calls and twice as many texts. First angry, then confused, now begging. Me. And you're not going to respond. M. She made it very clear she doesn't need anything from me. I'm just respecting her wishes. So, yeah, will definitely be interesting how this plays out in the next few months. I have a feeling my sister probably won't give a damn one way or the other, though. The next one is an entitled People Story. I never thought I'd be the type of person to have a running battle with a homeowners association, but here we are. This whole mess started about 2 years ago when my wife and I bought our first house in what seemed like a nice suburban neighborhood. The house was perfect. Great price, good location, and a decent-sized backyard where I could finally pursue my hobby of container gardening. The neighborhood had an HOA, but during our house hunting, the real estate agent assured us it was pretty relaxed. Just basic stuff, she said. Keep your lawn mowed, don't paint your house neon green, you know the drill. What she failed to mention was that the HOA board had recently been taken over by a group of retired busybodies who apparently had nothing better to do than make everyone else's life miserable. My first run-in with them happened about 3 months after we moved in. I had set up a small container garden in my backyard. Nothing crazy, just some tomatoes, herbs, and peppers in large pots arranged neatly near my back fence. I was proud of my little setup and spent most of my free time tending to it. The plants were thriving, and I was already planning to expand the following year. That's when I got my first letter from the HOA. It was a formal notice stating that my unsightly garden containers violated Section 4.7 of the community guidelines regarding appropriate landscaping materials. I read through my copy of the guidelines 3 times and couldn't find anything that specifically prohibited container gardens. Section 4.7 mentioned maintaining neat and attractive landscaping, but was pretty vague about what that actually meant. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting to get clarification. The meeting was held in the community center and there were maybe 8 homeowners in attendance besides the 5 board members. The board president was this guy who immediately struck me as the type who peaked in high school and never got over it. He had this condescending way of speaking to everyone like they were children who couldn't understand basic concepts. When I brought up my container garden during the public comment period, he barely looked up from his papers. He just waved his hand dismissively and said something about how containers weren't traditional landscaping, and that the board had the authority to determine what constituted appropriate yard maintenance. The other board members nodded along like bobbleheads. I asked for specific guidelines about what was and wasn't allowed, and that's when things got interesting. The board president got visibly annoyed and said that homeowners were expected to use common sense about yard appearance. When I pressed for actual written standards, he said the board would know it when they see it, and that they had the right to inspect any property to ensure compliance. Here's where I should have just let it go and moved my containers. But something about his attitude really rubbed me the wrong way. I'm usually a pretty easygoing person, but there's something about petty tyrants that brings out my stubborn side. I decided to research the HOA's actual legal authority, figuring I'd arm myself with knowledge before making any decisions. What I found was pretty eye-opening. While HOAs do have broad authority to enforce community standards, they still have to follow proper legal procedures. They can't just show up on your property whenever they feel like it. They need to provide proper notice, follow their own written procedures, and respect property rights. Most importantly, they can't enter private property without permission or proper legal authority. I also discovered that our HOA's guidelines were surprisingly vague and poorly written. The document was clearly thrown together by people who had no legal training and wanted to give themselves maximum flexibility to do whatever they wanted. This would actually work in my favor if things escalated. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to take a calculated risk. I sent a polite letter to the board stating that I believed my container garden complied with all written guidelines, and I requested a formal hearing if they disagreed. I also included copies of the relevant sections of state law regarding HOA procedures and property rights. I figured this would either resolve the issue or force them to be more specific about their objections. Their response came 2 weeks later and was exactly what I expected and hoped for. Instead of addressing the legal issues I'd raised, they doubled down on their authority. The board president sent a letter stating that they had absolute authority to determine appropriate landscaping and demanding immediate and unlimited access to inspect my property whenever they deemed necessary. The letter specifically stated that I must provide the board with access to inspect your property at any time, with no advance notice required, to ensure ongoing compliance with community standards. It also threatened escalating fines and potential legal action if I didn't comply within 10 days. This was perfect. They were demanding something they had no legal right to demand, and they'd put it in writing. The malicious compliance opportunity was sitting right there in front of me. I wrote back the next day, agreeing to their demands. My letter was brief and to the point. I acknowledge your request for immediate and unlimited access to inspect my property. I agree to provide such access as demanded. I made sure to copy their exact language about any time and no advance notice required. What they didn't realize, and what I was counting on, was that agreeing to their unreasonable demand didn't give them any actual legal authority to enter my property. It was still trespassing if they showed up without following proper procedures. They seemed to think that because I'd agreed to their inspection terms, they could just walk onto my property whenever they wanted. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I was in my kitchen making lunch when I spotted 3 board members walking around my backyard. They hadn't knocked on my door, hadn't called, and definitely hadn't provided any kind of formal notice. They were just wandering around my yard with clipboards, taking photos, and making notes. Now here's the beautiful part. I could have just gone outside and told them to leave, but that wouldn't have been malicious compliance. Instead, I let them continue their inspection while I quietly called the police non-emergency line. When the dispatcher answered, I explained that I had several people trespassing on my property. I mentioned that they were taking photos and appeared to be conducting some kind of surveillance. I was careful not to mention the HOA situation initially. I wanted the police to respond to a straightforward trespassing complaint. The dispatcher said they'd send an officer, and I was told it might take 20 to 30 minutes. Perfect. I grabbed a cup of coffee and watched from my kitchen window as the board members continued their inspection. They were really going all out, measuring distances between my containers, taking photos from multiple angles, and even looking through my fence into my neighbor's yard for comparison purposes. About 25 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up in front of my house. I watched the officer get out and look around before walking to my front door. I answered immediately and explained that there were several people in my backyard who hadn't asked permission to be there. The officer asked if I knew who they were, and I said they appeared to be from the neighborhood HOA, but that they had entered my property without permission. I showed him the letter where they demanded unlimited access and my response agreeing to provide such access as demanded. Here's what I was counting on. The officer would understand that agreeing to provide access doesn't mean giving blanket permission for people to trespass whenever they want. There's still a legal process that has to be followed. The officer looked at the letters and asked if I had given specific permission for today's inspection. I said no, they had just shown up without any notice or request. He nodded and asked me to wait inside while he dealt with the situation. I watched from my window as he walked around to my backyard. I could see him talking to the 3 board members, who were now looking significantly less confident than they had a few minutes earlier. The conversation went on for about 10 minutes, with the board members pointing to their clipboards and apparently trying to explain their authority. The officer wasn't buying it. I could see him shaking his head and gesturing toward the street. The board members looked increasingly agitated, and one of them, the board president, was waving his arms around and clearly raising his voice. That's when things took a turn I hadn't expected. Instead of just asking them to leave, the officer walked back to his car and called for backup. Within another 10 minutes, a second police car arrived. The officer came back to my door and asked if I wanted to press charges for criminal trespass. He explained that the board members had insisted they had legal authority to be on my property, but when he'd asked them to show him the specific law or court order that gave them that authority, they couldn't produce anything. This was the moment of truth. I could have just had them removed and called it a day. But they had spent months making my life difficult over a perfectly reasonable container garden, and they demanded unreasonable access to my property in writing. They'd also just trespassed on my property while insisting they had the right to do so. I told the officer yes, I wanted to press charges. What happened next was better than I could have hoped for. The 3 board members were arrested for criminal trespass. The board president was especially indignant, loudly proclaiming that the officer didn't understand HOA law and that they'd be filing complaints. The officer calmly explained that HOA authority doesn't override property rights and criminal law. But the real fireworks started when they were being loaded into the police cars. The board president was yelling about how this was all my fault and that I'd tricked them. He kept shouting that I had agreed to provide access, so they had every right to be there. The officer stopped and asked him to explain exactly how I had tricked them. The board president, now red-faced and completely flustered, said that I had agreed in writing to provide unlimited access for inspections. The officer asked if that meant I had given specific permission for today's inspection, or if they had followed any formal procedure to request access. When the board president couldn't answer, the officer pointed out that agreeing to provide access when properly requested is very different from giving people permission to trespass whenever they feel like it. This is where the malicious compliance really shone through. I had done exactly what they demanded. I had agreed to provide access for inspections, but I had agreed to their unreasonable and legally meaningless demand, knowing that it didn't actually give them any real authority. They had confused getting what they demanded with getting what they actually needed, which was proper legal authority to enter my property. The arrests made local news, which was embarrassing enough for the board members, but the real consequences came later. Within a week, I had calls from 3 different lawyers representing other homeowners who wanted to challenge various HOA actions. Apparently, our board had been pulling similar stunts with other residents, and the arrests had given people the courage to fight back. The board president and 1 other member resigned within a month. They couldn't handle the scrutiny that came after their arrests, especially when other homeowners started demanding to see the legal basis for various board decisions. It turned out that a lot of their authority was just bluff and intimidation. The remaining board members quickly passed a resolution clarifying the inspection procedures and acknowledging that they needed proper notice and homeowner permission before entering private property. They also revised the landscaping guidelines to be more specific and reasonable. As for my container garden, it's still there and bigger than ever. The new board actually complimented me on how neat and well-maintained it looks. I've even had neighbors ask for advice on starting their own container gardens. The criminal trespass charges were eventually dropped as part of a plea agreement, but the former board president had to complete community service and attend a class on property rights. More importantly, the arrest record was public, which made it pretty difficult for him to maintain his reputation as the neighborhood authority figure. Looking back, I realized this whole situation could have been avoided if the original board had just been reasonable about the garden, or if I had been willing to move my containers when they first complained. But sometimes you reach a point where you have to stand up to bullies, even petty ones. The key to the malicious compliance was understanding exactly what they were demanding and giving them precisely that, nothing more, nothing less. They demanded unlimited access, and I agreed to provide it. But they assumed that meant they could bypass all legal requirements and property rights. When they acted on that assumption, they learned the hard way that HOA authority has limits. The funniest part is that they essentially arrested themselves. If they had just followed proper procedures, sent a formal inspection request, scheduled a time, and respected my property rights, they could have inspected my garden to their heart's content. Instead, they let their egos and sense of authority override their common sense, and it cost them everything. These days, our HOA actually functions pretty well. The new board members understand that they're elected to serve the community, not rule over it. They focus on actual community issues like road maintenance and park upkeep instead of harassing homeowners over minor aesthetic preferences. And every time I water my thriving container garden, I can't help but smile thinking about how 3 grown adults managed to get themselves arrested because they couldn't tell the difference between getting what they demanded and getting what they were legally entitled to. The next one is a petty revenge story. This was well over a decade ago, but I wanted to share. I was born with a congenital heart disease and had surgery as a kid. I am completely okay, but sports was obviously not my thing. I was small, skinny, and clumsy because I never really could do the typical outdoor stuff like most kids. Got teased and bullied and all that. Typical for a geeky kid who doesn't excel with a football. In high school, we had a mildly problematic PE teacher, a typical sports dude who would make fun of the slower kids. I still remember how he ordered my overweight friend to do a gymnastics jump from a trampoline over a stool, which he obviously couldn't do, and he fell so hard he cracked his head. I found peace with myself long before and mostly didn't care and just took it. But it was stupid, and I hated how he always encouraged the jock culture of making fun of the nerds. We would constantly do basketball or soccer, football. Thing about my specific condition is I don't do explosive and reactive sports at all, so I would have to sit down every few minutes to catch my breath. You would think what's wrong with that, but I was shamed about being the weakling of the class every week. I like sports, though, a lot. I was just always told by my parents and doctors to take it easy, and growing up I noticed I had no problem whatsoever with endurance and steady, long-distance efforts. As long as I don't go into red, I could keep it up for quite a while. So it's not a surprise I fell in love with road cycling when I first saw the Tour de France on TV. I was super skinny, couldn't sprint, but I could climb a long mountain any day, pacing myself and blowing nearly anyone off my wheel on endurance. I got myself a road bike and never told anyone at school about my rides. Here comes the revenge. We had a class sports day, and there was a bus arranged to take us to the top of a mountain about an hour away where we were to go on a hike. Our PE teacher said that if anyone wants, he will cycle up there and we could join him on the climb instead of the hike. I was the only one to volunteer. He was surprised and commented something to the effect of keeping up and not gonna wait for you, but I insisted. He couldn't know I was more than capable to climb that mountain because he only saw me struggling with sports with him. He also couldn't know that was my home hill, literally starting a kilometer from my house. I did that climb 100 plus times and knew it blind, knew my pacing, and while I was no Tadej Pogacar, I knew I could probably drop my PE teacher at will there. For cyclists out there, the climb is 12, 5 kilometers, 9% gradient, super regular. For non-cyclists, a perfect climb for a lightweight rider with good pacing and stamina. So the day arrives and I did my warm-up, nutrition, and everything as if it was a life-or-death mountaintop time trial and rock up at the school in my full racing kit and my racing bike. I was 17, weighed 55 kilograms, and totally prepared. He was a typical middle-aged, overconfident ex-soccer player, probably weighing 90 kilograms on a standard mountain bike. Super perfect situation. He sets a relatively hard pace on the 10 kilometers flat before the climb and I don't speak or take the front. I take my good time to get back on his wheel after intersections and he probably thinks he will drop me the second we start going uphill. Then the climb starts and it becomes very apparent to me, but not to him, that he is near his limit, but that it's at least 5 kilometers per h slower than what I could do on that mountain. But I don't attack him. That would not be satisfying. Instead, I start bantering how someone's getting dropped today, and it would be embarrassing if the whole class sees how I beat him. And then I take over the pace and slowly start turning the screw on him. I went only a little faster, then a bit more. I knew after about 3 kilometers he was in the red, so I ease off, keeping him just slightly over his limit for the next half an hour. I wanted to make him suffer, but without dropping him. I let him recover for a tiny bit if he starts looking too bad, but then I would slowly push the tempo up to make it as painful to him as possible. It was Tour de France level mind games. I don't think I've ever enjoyed myself on my bike more. We made it near the top together and I let it rip on the last 300m or so, and it was that typical humiliation attack every amateur group ride cyclist knows. He dropped like a stone. I got my revenge and was very happy with myself. He said something about his heavy bike and I kept my mouth shut, but it got better. On the top, he was clearly dead. So much so he had to vomit in the parking lot, and even if only a few classmates saw it, everyone knew. He had to sit out the hike after and I just quietly sat there with him, because I didn't need to do the hike like he promised, and just looked at him enjoying the sweet revenge. I didn't say anything after that, nor did he. He never made any comments to me in PE class again. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I do customer service for this skincare company, based in Minneapolis, work from home, answer emails and chats mostly. The products are fine, I guess. Overpriced. They're always pushing this anti-aging serum that's like $80 for a tiny bottle. Our marketing team had this brilliant idea last month. They want to feature real customer reviews on the website and social media. The CEO sent this whole email about authenticity and genuine voices and transparency. They set up a shared folder where we're supposed to drop screenshots of great customer feedback, anything 4-5 stars, glowing reviews, people loving the products. Here's the thing though, most of our customer emails aren't glowing. They're people saying the serum made them break out, or asking why we charged them twice, or confused about subscription cancellations. We get maybe one actually positive email for every 20 complaints, but they kept pushing. Weekly reminders about adding to the testimonial folder. My supervisor even mentioned it in my one-on-one. We need more content from you, so I started adding testimonials. Real ones. This made my skin worse than before I started. I've been trying to cancel for 3 months, and you keep charging my card. For $80, I expected something that actually works. Just screenshots, exactly like they asked for. Authentic customer voices. Took them almost 2 weeks to notice because apparently nobody was actually reading the folder, just collecting submissions. Then I guess someone in marketing actually opened the files, got called into a Zoom with my supervisor and the marketing director yesterday. They're asking what I was thinking. Did I misunderstand the assignment? This isn't helpful. I pulled up the CEO's email, read it out loud. We want authentic customer testimonials that showcase real experiences. Long silence. Marketing director tries to recover, says obviously they meant positive testimonials. That's not what the email says. It says authentic and real. Most of our customer feedback is negative. I gave you what we actually receive. My supervisor looked like she wanted to die. They deleted the shared folder this morning, and now there's a new system where only 5-star reviews get submitted and they have to be pre-approved before going to marketing. The CEO's email about authenticity and transparency is still in my inbox, though. Haven't deleted it. Seems like it might be useful to keep. The next one is an entitled People Story. It was a sunny day as I pulled up to my house in the picturesque neighborhood of Belgrade, Serbia. I had recently moved to this charming area, excited to start a new chapter in my life. Little did I know that my peaceful existence would soon be disrupted by a relentless force known as Karen. As I parked my car, I noticed a vehicle obstructing the street, preventing me from driving any further. Confusion clouded my mind as I rolled down my window and approached the woman standing outside the car. She introduced herself as Karen and inquired about my destination. Perplexed by her audacity, I replied, "I live on this street. This is where I'm going." Karen's response sent shockwaves through me. She claimed to own the public road, an outrageous assertion that defied logic and common sense. Despite my protests, she remained adamant, her cigarette smoke swirling arrogantly around her. Unable to reason with her, I retreated to my driveway, hoping the encounter was a mere anomaly. Seeking solace, I confided in my neighbor, who happened to live opposite the rundown house where Karen resided. To my relief, my neighbor reassured me that Karen was notorious in the neighborhood for her unreasonable behavior. According to my neighbor, Karen had moved away from the area due to her home becoming a hoarder's haven. Although no one could substantiate the claim without trespassing, the deteriorating condition of the house lent credibility to the story. It seemed that Karen's troubled mind was the root of her hostility towards others, an unfortunate reality I was about to experience firsthand. A few days later, I awoke to a distressing sight. My car was being towed, and there stood Karen, reveling in her malicious triumph. She had called the towing company, falsely accusing me of parking on private property. My frustration grew as I confronted the tow truck driver, who reluctantly admitted his affiliation with Karen and the dubious nature of the tow. Determined not to let Karen's actions go unpunished, I decided to fight fire with fire. Retrieving my car proved to be a minor inconvenience as I had the financial means to cover the expenses. However, I was prepared to dedicate my time and energy to expose Karen's true nature. I reported Karen's abandoned house as a safety hazard to the city authorities. Expressing my concerns about the condition of the property and its potential occupancy, I urged them to investigate. To my delight, my neighbor joined forces, reporting a putrid smell emanating from Karen's abode. The city promptly responded to our complaints, sending inspectors to evaluate the house's safety. To our horror, they discovered not only the reality of a hoarder's nightmare, but also numerous perilous conditions within the premises. The neglected state of Karen's house rendered it uninhabitable. Justice prevailed, as the city ordered the demolition of the hazardous structure, eliminating the blight that had plagued the neighborhood. The property where the dilapidated house once stood was eventually purchased by my neighbor, expanding her domain and improving the community's aesthetic. The tale serves as a reminder that antagonizing others can have severe consequences. Karen, once an oppressive force, had inadvertently orchestrated her own downfall. The triumph of justice and the restoration of peace in our neighborhood stood as a testament to the power of perseverance and solidarity. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I grew up on a horse ranch in Colorado. We had a long piece of property, about 80 acres, and we raised Missouri foxtrotters. We had lived there for almost 20 years when some folks bought a strip of property way at the back of our land. It was a strange plot of land as it was very narrow and was sandwiched between our back fence and a busy county road. We were surprised anyone would buy it, actually, as it forced the house to be pretty close to the said road. Well, we never met these new neighbors until one day my dad gets a notice from a lawyer telling us that, after having surveyed the property lines, our back fence encroaches on their property between 3 and 6 inches, depending on the spot along the fence line. These folks had never met us, never introduced themselves. Our first introduction was this legal demand. My father was a salt-of-the-earth kind of man, very kind but also very strong-willed. He called these folks, arranged a meet-up, and tried to talk some sense into them. First, did 3 to 6 inches really matter that much, and why had they not come to us to talk it through? He even offered a number of different compromises. These folks were hostile from the get-go. They demanded he move the fence immediately or they would sue. Apparently the law stated they had to put their house so far away from our fence line, and they wanted to push it as far back from the road as they could when they built it, so they wanted that 6 inches very badly. I still remember when my dad got home from the meeting. He hung his hat up and shook his head when he told my mom in his slow way, "Well, looks like we got the kind of folks for neighbors you don't ever want to have for neighbors." They sued and won, and we were forced to move the fence in 2 weeks. I say we because I was the free slave labor, as all farm kids are in this kind of thing. All that fencing material and the time were a big cost for my family, but we got the work done in early spring. Here is where the fun comes in. So the new neighbors broke ground and built all through the end of winter and into spring. The very next weekend after they had moved into their house, Dad rousted me out of bed, and we took the big truck into town to the lumber yard. I was extremely puzzled as we loaded up a bunch of fencing material and building supplies. We didn't have any big projects going that I knew about, and I kept asking him what it was for, but he just told me to wait and see with a devilish smile on his face. We built a pen and a small enclosure very near our back property line, directly behind the neighbor's new shiny house. The next day, one of our farm friends delivered a half-dozen pigs to their new home. Dan insisted on feeding those hog's table scraps and all the things that would go in the composter, as well as some good balanced hog feed to keep them healthy. Now you may not know this, but the smell of pig excrement is directly related to what they eat and their pen. Table scraps make them smell bad. I mean bad. I had to drive the four-wheeler back there every day to take care of them, and within a month, halfway there, and my eyes would start watering. It smelled so bad. When we mucked out the pen with the bobcat, we also made the pile right next to the pen. I can't even imagine how bad the smell was living in that house. The neighbors, of course, freaked out, and again, without ever even trying to talk to us, went the legal route. They lost. The area was zoned agricultural, and my dad had done his homework to make sure he was breaking no laws or regulations. The pigs were far enough from us and our other neighbors that it didn't bother anyone but the people he wanted it to bother. Come fall, when winter moved in, we sold the pigs for slaughter, and Dad stacked up a bunch of building supplies next to the pen and let the neighbors know we would be expanding the profitable operation in the spring when they came out to scream at him. He smiled the whole time, speaking in his slow, steady way. The new neighbors sold their new house in January when the ground was frozen and the new owners would not smell the pen. As soon as the old neighbors were gone, we tore down the enclosure, spread the nasty stuff on the hayfield, and the new neighbors never had any bad smell come spring. They also turned out to be great neighbors and are still lifelong friends. Never mess with a rancher. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I've had my number for 5 years, maybe 6. I don't remember exactly. When I got this number, the previous owner still received regular messages and phone calls. It's completely understandable that she didn't have everyone updated on her newest number or lack of number. The first 3 months, it meant nothing to me. I'd answer the calls and send them on their way. Well, that was until I got a phone call from an elementary school looking for someone. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah's daughter was throwing up and running a high fever and needed to go home. I told the school that this was a new number for me, and there was no Sarah around. I thought that certainly this issue would make her come to the realization that she needed to update her number. But no. I had to block the school's number because I continued to get calls and texts that had way too much information about Sarah's daughter, including her name, age, and school events with times and changes in school schedules. I wasn't comfortable receiving that info, so I blocked it. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I blocked the school, Sarah's grandmother called me because I assumed the school couldn't get a hold of Sarah, but I had to tell Grandma that I'm not Sarah, and to please ask her granddaughter to update her information. Sarah still did not. With all the information that I unwillingly had on Sarah, full name, age, where she attends college, her home address, and where she works, I found her on Facebook and kindly asked her to not use her old number anymore. I'm not sure if she saw the message or not, but it didn't help my problem. This has been ongoing for years, and it's not just spam. It's people she knows, co-workers, family, doctors, even her real estate agent. So, before, if she had appointments that were asking to be verified via text to my phone, I would just ignore them. But she had an appointment this time, and I am just so fed up with Sarah still giving out this number after 5 years of this nonsense that I canceled her appointment for her. A few days later, a new appointment to the same place needed verification, and I canceled it again, and the next one I get will be canceled also. Get your act together, Sarah. The next one is an entitled people story. So this has been developing over the last 6 weeks or so, when an elderly woman, her friend, and her handicapped niece moved into the house beside us. Things started off interesting, but the women all seemed nice enough. My wife and I were finishing up a movie at around 11 p.m. when we heard something at the side of our house. It sounded like someone was trying to get through our side gate into the backyard. Upon investigating, I saw that someone was trying to get in. Our new neighbors had just driven into town and were confused about which side gate was theirs, and were attempting to open our locked gate. I helped them to get into their own yard. Their real estate agent had left their key in the backyard, and helped them move their bags into their house. I got to meet the 3 women who were moving in and realized that they were in no shape to be moving heavy things around the house. The new owner, Candy, not her real name, but her real name is still a stripper's name, so I think it works, is in her 70s and gets around with a cane. Her friend, I believe that they are romantically involved, but we live in the South, so I think she is accustomed to not saying so explicitly, gets around with a walker, and the niece is in her 50s, and is quite severely mentally handicapped. Seeing this, I offered to help them move anything that the movers had misplaced. Candy mentioned that some items were in the wrong rooms, but I had to be getting home soon, and would be back tomorrow to help. I arrived at their place around 8 the next night after getting our kids to bed and just moved all their boxes from the garage into the correct rooms. Not a big deal. The real issue was that they had some large pieces of furniture that were misplaced, and I did not have a dolly to move them around on my own. At this point, Candy and her friend were being extremely thankful and polite, so I told the women that I would be more than happy to snag one from a friend on the way home from work tomorrow and could help to move the rest of the stuff, and that I would be over at about the same time. Well, work the next day turned into a complete dumpster fire. I ended up having to stay at work until a bit after midnight to get everything done that needed to be done. When I got home, I wrote a note explaining what had happened, and that I would still be willing to help move things when I got off work tomorrow. After this, I never had another good experience with them. I went over the next day and asked if they had seen my note, and Candy said, "Because you flaked, I had to hire someone to do this for me." I was completely taken aback, as this was a complete reversal from her original demeanor. 2 days later, Candy had someone setting up internet, and as these are all new constructions, a new line had to be buried. The box which the line connected into for Candy's house, and our own was a couple of feet on our side of the property line. As this was done on a Saturday, I was home while the line was being buried and asked the installer to run the line on the neighbor's side of the property line until he could turn into the box. Neighbors had told him to run it along our pavers leading to the backyard, about 2 feet over our property line. I am sure he did not realize that he was on our property, but Candy did. The next week we got hit with a fine from our homeowner association for leaving dirt from work on our property and our neighbor's lawn. Going outside, I saw that there was a small amount of sand right around where the buried line came into the box on our property, and when I explained to the homeowner association that this was caused by the installation of the neighbor's cable, the fine was dropped. Clearly, Candy had called this in, which really pissed me off, but she would not come to the door when I was knocking to talk to her about it. Small things like this kept happening. I would go out and our recycling was full, as it takes a few weeks to get your bin delivered, so Candy just threw her stuff in ours. We had an homeowner association inspector come over to assess unauthorized permanent structures on our property. These structures were a trampoline, which is not considered permanent by the homeowner association, and a small play structure, which is, however, we applied with the homeowner association to install that one. Well, she has escalated things over the last couple of weeks. The Monday before last, we had a crew coming in to install solar panels on our home. While this was being done, the cops showed up as someone had called in that people were breaking onto our property and trying to get through our back door. The cops were cool and said that someone must have just been confused about what was going on, and I informed them of the issues that we were having with our neighbor, but they didn't say much about it and didn't do anything. I was out with the installers working in the yard. There was no way that anyone could reasonably believe that people were breaking into our home. Once again, we had an inspector called on us to check out an unapproved modification to our roof, the solar panels that we paid $400 to the homeowner association to install. On Sunday, the cops showed up again, and this time it was much more serious. The call that they had gotten this time was that our children were locked in our backyard in the heat, that my 2-year-old was out there naked, and that they were screaming to be let back in. Basically, we were being accused of abusing our children. Thankfully, the screaming was still going on when the cops arrived, as my 2-year-old was squealing and laughing, running through the sprinklers. It took a little longer to assuage the cops this time, and they told me that I probably should have my daughter in a swimsuit next time. Due to the nature of this call, they did speak with the neighbor afterward. Candy feigned ignorance and said that her handicapped niece must have placed the call. The niece is almost completely nonverbal, so this was clearly BS. But I do not think that the cops wanted to deal with this, and talked with us one more time, explaining their conversation with Candy before heading out. Not really sure what we can do at this point. I submitted a complaint to the homeowner association, but I do not think that is going to do anything, and I am not sure if this has progressed to criminal harassment yet, but I am sure this is far from over. Update 1. The neighbor on the opposite side of Candy, let's call her Katie, has been getting some work done on her home, including the installation of a sunroom. At 6 a.m. on Sunday, Candy made her way into Katie's backyard through the normally locked side gate and went into the sunroom to look around. Katie was notified by her security system that someone was on her property, so she called the cops. Candy was gone by the time the cops arrived, and Katie did not recognize her, but Candy's return to her property was caught on our Ring camera. The commotion next door got us up, and my wife checked our notifications. Katie had the cops issue a trespass to Candy, and we requested that they also inform Candy that she was not welcome on our property either. Cops told us it would be criminal trespass if she does so after being warned. We reached out to a local security company regarding getting cameras on the sides and back of our home. The quote is a bit out of our budget, so we will be looking around for more options, but we will definitely be installing them. I know we can save a ton by setting up our system, but the wife hates exposed wires, and it is definitely out of my capacity to do something she would find acceptable. The next one is an entitled parent story, so the only reason why the entitled parent in this story didn't go to prison was because I was 18 at the time, but the fact that this happened the way it did still pisses me off. So when I turned 18, I started working at a call center and often walked around the city a lot in order to avoid my toxic mother. Yes, I know what you're thinking, but I was safe and always had a form of self-defense. I was young, but not stupid. Anyways, that year, I experienced another growth spurt and went from a C cup to a DD cup. And I was getting a lot of weird looks when in public. As much as I hate to say it, I was pretty young and naive, so I never thought it was because of the way my body changed, but I preferred to keep my distance from people. One day, I decided that I was going to go to Walmart so that I could pick out some yarn for a crochet project I wanted to work on while at work. We were allowed to crochet as long as we didn't avoid the calls that were automatically answered on our systems. While I was checking out the yarn, I noticed a kid who looked like he was 13-14 standing at the end of the aisle watching me. Thanks to my history of getting bullied and beaten up, I immediately grew cautious and started debating if I wanted to get my yarn here or go to the Hobby Lobby across the parking lot. Before I could make a decision, an adult man came up and started leading the son off, so I started to relax and think that I was overreacting. That is, until the ED came back. ED, excuse me, but where did you get you implants? They look so real. Excuse me? I was really embarrassed and shocked, and I was already getting creeper vibes from this guy. Your implants... He waves his hands in front of my breasts and gets uncomfortably close to me. Where did you get them? Me. I was at a loss for words and didn't know if he was serious or just being a creep overall. At this moment, the kid came up and poked at my right breast, and I instinctively smacked his hand away, not caring that he was a kid. Excuse me, but you really shouldn't do that, especially to a woman. It's not polite, and it's considered SA and SH. Edie immediately got mad at me and started screaming at me to not touch his son. He said that it was my fault and that if I didn't want attention like this, then I should keep my fun bags put away. I was in tears and looking around for an escape, especially since, the more the ED yelled at me, the closer he got to me. He started telling me that there was no way my breasts were real, and that he needed to feel them to know for sure. He even told me that I needed to let the ES touch them so he could learn the difference between implants and real breasts. Remembering the fact that I had my pepper spray in my bag for any occasion where I needed to defend myself, I usually had a knife too, but that seemed a bit extreme in the heat of the moment. I pulled the can of pepper spray and told them both to step back and get away from me. At this point, an employee turned the corner, having heard us yelling, and saw me holding the pepper spray. He freaked out and called for a manager before coming up and yelling at me, demanding to know what I was doing. Thanks to me being in tears, the ED was able to butt in and started lying to the employee that I was seducing his son and pulled my pepper spray out when the ED had tried to come to his son's rescue. The ES immediately started agreeing with the ED, and the employee was already saying that he was going to call the police while the ED demanded that me and my big breasts get kicked out of the store. Thankfully, at that second, one of my co-workers, a big burly guy who often gave me a ride at night after hearing that I took the taxi home at night because my mother refused to teach me to drive, rounded the corner, leading a manager right to the mess. The manager demanded that everyone shut up and calm down, and when we had, he turned to me and asked my side of the story. I told him how the ED insisted that I needed to let them feel my breasts to see if they were real, and how I had already explained I wasn't comfortable and didn't want their attention. The ED backtracked on his story and tried to defend himself and EK, saying it was all for educational purposes, and lied that I had agreed beforehand. This is when my coworker got mad and pointed at the camera at the end of the aisle, reminding them that it would have caught everything. The ED and EK both went silent for a moment before making a break for the exit. The manager took off after them, yelling at them to stop, and my coworker berated the employee for threatening me the way he did. Of course, the ED and EK got away, but the employee was fired, and I never went back to that store by myself per my friend's request. Please teach your sons to respect women and don't harass women. Plenty of us are insecure of our bodies and don't want the attention our bodies attract, and we appreciate it if you don't make things worse for us. Also, never assume that a woman's body is fake or that you are entitled to touch it. The next one is an entitled people story. I consider myself a true car enthusiast, and one of my most cherished possessions was my beloved 1969 Chevrolet Corvette. It took me years of dedication and a significant amount of money to restore her to her former glory. Unlike some collectors who keep their cars locked away, I preferred to drive mine and share its beauty with the world. Every time I took her out for a spin, I received countless compliments and sparked engaging conversations. Little did I know that my story wouldn't be about the joy of owning a classic car, but rather the ordeal I faced with my vindictive homeowner association president. Living in a non-optional homeowner association neighborhood meant I had to abide by their rules, even if I didn't choose to be a part of it. From the moment I fixed up cars and proudly drove my vintage beauty, the homeowner association president held a grudge against me. He despised my passion and took issue with the fact that my car added character to the neighborhood. Numerous times he confronted me, complaining about the noise and how my presence made the whole area look messy. I brushed off his comments, knowing he couldn't do much to stop me. After all, I was working on my car during reasonable hours, and had the right to use my property as I saw fit. One fateful day, the situation reached its boiling point when the homeowner association president knocked on my door. Bleary-eyed and still in need of my morning coffee, I greeted him with confusion. Hello? Homeowner Association. President, I'm here to inform you about a new rule regarding parked cars in our neighborhood. His smug grin betrayed his satisfaction, while I remained oblivious to the new rule's details. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Homeowner Association. President, the new rule states that all dilapidated and unsightly cars are not allowed to be parked on the streets. They give our neighborhood a shabby appearance, discouraging visitors from coming. Why didn't this information come through the monthly letter? The one I typically ignored and discarded as junk mail. Homeowner Association. President, I thought it was important to personally inform you so you can avoid having your car towed by putting it in your garage. Suddenly it dawned on me that this rule was concocted solely to force my car off the street. My car, though old, was in impeccable condition, and I had no intention of moving it. It took me longer than it should have to understand his malicious intentions, but at least I caught on before he left. My car doesn't fall into that category, so I won't be moving it. In fact, my car is worth more than yours, so perhaps you should worry about keeping your cheap piece of junk off the street before it gets towed. With that, I firmly closed the door and retreated inside, needing to cool down after the infuriating encounter. Let me clarify. I have no qualms with people driving inexpensive cars. Every vehicle has its merits. However, I knew that particular dig would irk him, and I couldn't resist the opportunity to get under his skin. Little did I know this altercation was far from over. While I peacefully slept that night, the homeowner association president orchestrated a devious plan to bend the rules in his favor. He had secretly called a tow truck company, falsely claiming that my car violated the homeowner association rules and needed to be impounded. Although I didn't know the exact details of what he said, I was certain it bore no resemblance to reality, since no legitimate tow company would consider my well-maintained car as beat up or abandoned. When I discovered my car was missing, I wasted no time and headed straight to the homeowner association president's house, determined to locate my stolen possession. I intended to sue him, but first, I needed to retrieve my car. To my dismay, he informed me that I had to file a motion through the homeowner association, and only then would they disclose the location where my car had been taken. Although he could have easily provided the information, I reluctantly went through the lengthy process. After 4 agonizing days, I finally learned the tragic fate of my beloved Corvette. To my horror, it was too late. When I arrived at the scrapyard to reclaim my car, I discovered that it had already been crushed. My heart sank as a surge of emotions overwhelmed me. The pride and joy I had poured my heart and soul into had been stolen from me, obliterated before its time. It wasn't merely impounded. The homeowner association president had gone to the extent of hiring a towing company specialized in scrapping broken vehicles. My sorrow transformed into seething anger, directing every ounce of it towards the person responsible for this irreparable loss. As I had already planned, I proceeded with legal action, enlisting the help of a lawyer who recognized the magnitude of the injustice. We discussed the compensation I could potentially receive, taking into account the car's estimated value. I had conducted thorough research and knew my car could have fetched around $50,000 in its pristine condition. Since it was irreplaceable, the homeowner association would also have to pay an additional amount to account for the loss of the unique product they had destroyed. Moreover, my lawyer believed we had a case against the entire homeowner association for the illegal removal of my vehicle. Fueled by a thirst for justice, I sought vengeance even as we entered the courtroom. My anger remained unwavering. Fortunately, luck was on my side, as the judge assigned to the case happened to be a fellow car enthusiast. However, the path to justice was far from straightforward, and I braced myself for the legal battle that lay ahead. The judge, acknowledging his expertise in automotive matters, delved into the intricacies of the case. The homeowner association faced serious repercussions for towing my car based solely on its appearance, violating their own rules. Furthermore, they had failed to ensure the car was taken to an appropriate impound lot, as opposed to a scrapyard. The judge recognized the true value of my classic car, agreeing that it had been irreparably damaged and was now worth $50,000. The weight of this loss loomed over me. No amount of money could fill the void left by my cherished Corvette. Nevertheless, the homeowner association had to be held accountable for their actions. In the end, the judgment was in my favor. The homeowner association was ordered to pay a total of $75,000 in compensation for their grave misconduct. Some might consider this a victory, but deep inside, I would have given back every penny to have my car restored to its former glory. The homeowner association president, burdened by the financial consequences of his actions, announced his resignation from the position. Though no one explicitly admitted it, it was clear that the rest of the board had pushed him out due to the exorbitant amount of money he had cost them. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Wife and I were sitting on our stoop and hanging out with the kitten outside after a long day at work, 8 p.m. The kitty is playing in the snow nearby, at the edge of our driveway, which connects to the road. Out of nowhere, a Ford pickup speeds by and swerves into our driveway, narrowly missing a very scared kitty. A skinny younger guy jumps out of the driver's side and urgently walks toward the stoop, his back to the road, and starts to fiddle with his zipper. No way, man. He hasn't seen us sitting there, it's dark out. So I shout, hoping he won't whip it out right there and urinate at us. I think he may be a friend of our neighbors at first. They are pretty trashy. Me, hey man, who the hell are you? You need to slow the hell down. A-hole. Oh, hey. He continues to unzip and his pathetic wang is spurting dribbles of urine in our direction. I notice he is swaying awkwardly. Probably drunk, I think. Me. Look, mother ducker, kids live here. You can't just expose yourself. Now get the duck out before I call the cops. A-hole. Good, call him, I don't care. Wife. Fine. I don't have anything better to do, ATM. Wife dials the non-emergency number to the station, which is less than 100 yards down the road, and puts it on speaker so A-hole can hear we aren't bluffing. Somehow, after what feels like an eternity, the dude is finally finishing up and holsters his private part. On the phone, wife tells the police that some guy sped into our driveway, barely missed our kitten, and is exposing himself while probably drunk. A hole. Good, tell them my plate number is wrong plate number. He slurs and stands there defiantly with his belt open and hanging limp. I walk a few steps so I can see his real plate number and read it aloud to my wife. At this point, the guy seems to slowly realize that this is really happening, and with his pants unbuckled, he waddles quickly back to the driver's side and peels off down the road, swerving in the snow. My wife is still speaking to the police operator when a badass police charger absolutely roars by, presumably in response to our call. She ends the call and we resume our night, kind of chuckling it off while reassuring our little kitten. The next day we call back to see if anything came of it in the end. Turns out they got him just down the road. DUI, underage possession of alcohol, indecent exposure in a school zone, and reckless driving. We caught all the audio on our front door camera and forwarded it to the officer in charge. They say it may help add more charges and strengthen others. Good luck, a-hole with no license, fines out the ass, and being a registered sex offender for life. The morale is, if someone warns you to move along, you better do it. Also, don't drive drunk, people. The next one is a petty revenge story. About 4 years ago, I used to live in a nice homeowners association in a small town in Texas, and enjoyed having only one neighbor over my backyard fence. The plot was about 2 acres, and the other side of the backyard butted up to a hayfield. The stars were beautiful at night because of virtually no light pollution. However, my neighbor decided to install an incredibly bright security light over their back porch aimed right at my back patio and bedroom windows. I tried to ignore it at first and put shades in the bedroom, but on the patio, it was like having a bright LED headlight in your face all night. I consulted the homeowner association about adding a privacy addition to my fence to increase its height, and they said no because it's already at the 8-foot maximum allowed height. They said there was nothing in the bylaws or whatever about bright lights, so there was nothing they could do. Diplomacy. So I hated for this to be the thing where we finally had a formal greeting after 3 years of back porch waves, but I walked over and rang the doorbell with $20. I politely explained how the light was causing the aforementioned nuisance and asked if there was any way I could convince him to point the light down or in a different direction. I even offered to buy him a case of beer, the $20, out of goodwill, and even a new motion-sensing light. He seemed nice and agreed to point it down, but after waiting a month, nothing changed. I went back to have another polite conversation, and he said he had changed his mind and was going to leave it on every night and leave it pointed as is. Petty revenge. Needless to say, I was a bit upset that diplomacy failed, and I started figuring out how to win. If the military taught me anything, there are always ways to adapt and overcome, so I started researching fast-growing plants to create big privacy walls and reading through the homeowner association, bylaws, and city-state ordinances to find out what I could or couldn't plant and if there were any repercussions for encroachment across the property line. I quickly discovered that running bamboo, despite being very invasive, would grow super fast and make the neighbor's house and light disappear from view. There was nothing in the homeowner association/state/city books to prevent me from planting it, or cause legal recourse if it spread and grew on his side of the fence. The only thing he could do is cut anything that grew on his side of the line. So I pulled the trigger and planted a bunch of golden bamboo, which grows and spreads crazy fast in Texas and grows up to 20 feet tall. I didn't care if it took over the fence line because his house is 15 feet from the fence while mine was 50 yards away. So I planted a bunch right against the fence and only put a root barrier on my side to prevent it from spreading into my yard. Within 6 months, his house and light were gone from view, replaced by a pretty bamboo jungle row at the edge of my yard. Within 1 year, he complained that it was growing into his yard via mailed letters, but they went right into the trash with no response. He rang my doorbell once, and I looked at him through the window but just didn't answer the door. I unexpectedly sold the house and moved 2 years after planning for a career opportunity. It's been 2 years since I sold, and I just checked the property on Google Earth, and his entire backyard is bamboo. The next one is an entitled people story. I am 26 years old, and I decided to open my own business this year. Moving forward in this post, I should point out that I'm from a small town, 1,000 people, in the rural Midwest. Because of this, everyone has some sort of connection with someone. We went to one of the liquor stores in the closest city 30-ish minutes away, small city 8,000 people. When we were grabbing some alcohol for a party, I was looking at the prices and saw how insane the prices were. For a 6-pack of a local beer, we were charged $15. I was thinking about this and figured that I could probably make bank opening a liquor store. Back in February, I was furious about my crappy job and thinking out loud how cool it would be to own my own business to a friend. My friend's mom happened to be the president of the local bank. He told me, "Hey, with the pandemic, the bank has been struggling to find customers to give out loans. Right now, the bank is giving loans for cheap." A couple of weeks later, I went in and met with my friend's mom and pitched my idea with the research I had done on alcohol prices, potential demand, and estimated income. I got the loan at a fantastic interest rate. I bought a building, which happened to be the former bank, and hired my dad to help me renovate the building. My dad is a general contractor, and he gave me an excellent quote on materials and labor. After working everything out with the distributors, getting the proper licenses, and getting my paperwork I needed for the government, I was ready to open my liquor store in May. I had started taking out ads in the local newspaper advertising my store and my prices. When I was in talks with my distributors, I learned, even with inflation and everything else, the liquor stores in the city had like an 80% markup. I talked to a local business owner, and he suggested that I have around a 35% to 40% markup. Because of this, I was significantly cheaper than the closest liquor store, and had a much wider selection than the gas stations and small local stores nearby. My hometown is near a national forest. As such, we have a ton of people who come up for weekends for recreational activities year-round. My first week, the week before Memorial Weekend, after opening, I had made a $4,000 profit. It was great being my own boss. If someone was rude to me or my girlfriend, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can do your business elsewhere." If someone tells my GF, "Go back to China, you chink idiot," they can pay me 15% more at the register. Did the gang and I run out of alcohol? Time to grab my keys, not car keys, the store keys. My apartment is like 2 blocks away, and go to the store. That's not to say that it wasn't difficult running my own business, especially that my only employee was my GF, and we were both working 6 or 7, 10 to 12-hour days a week. I was both manager, accountant, and cashier, but duck, it's so much nicer knowing I can tell someone to pound sand for being a prick. Couple of weeks after Memorial Day, some old guy walks into my store a couple of minutes after I opened. He seemed friendly enough, but eventually he offered to buy my store. I'm not going to say the amount, but it wouldn't have even covered my principal on the loan. I rejected the proposal outright and refused to negotiate the sum higher. He walked out of my store saying, "Welp, you'll be sorry you rejected that offer." The next month, a guy walked into my store and asked if I was the owner. After saying yes, I was informed that my business was being sued by this random guy I never heard of for libel. After he left, I was freaking out and I decided that I was going to close early. When I got home, I Googled the guy and soon saw a picture of the guy that tried to buy my store. It turns out that that is the guy who owns both of the liquor stores in the nearby city. It also just so happens that he is on city council. With a little bit of further digging, I learned that this city has an ordinance that reads, "Any business institution that does not fulfill the definition of a restaurant, tavern, or liquor dispensary will be excluded from obtaining a license for the sale of alcohol." Later, I discovered that the same guy happens to be the head of the board, which approves liquor licenses. I love small-town corruption. Either way, I had a major issue. My maternal uncle happens to be a lawyer in a neighboring state. I decided to call him and try to get some legal advice. I talked to him and read the documents that I had been handed/served over the phone, and the research I had done. After receiving all of the information I had read off, I was expecting to get some sort of advice, but instead heard, "Hang on, I got to make a call," and he hung up. I'm freaking out. I was actually about to post my first post to our legal advice. I'll be honest, I just wanted someone to tell me it was going to be okay, and I didn't need to crawl to this guy on my hands and knees. As I was writing the title, my uncle called back. "Hey, OP, I just got off the phone with my partner. He agreed that we can take your case pro bono. If you would like to accept, we can discuss at my office tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This is how I learned that my uncle is on the bar in 3 states. So we meet, and we discuss the case. It turns out that the guy filed the libel suit against my business based on the ads I took out in the local newspapers. He claimed that my ads were targeted to damage his and his business's reputation. There were a few other things that I had no idea what was being referenced, but Uncle assured me that we would win this case no problem. 3 weeks later, the case is dismissed, but after my uncle says people like that piece of work will likely try to file another suit against you. If that happens, call me and promise I will help. The next day I get served again, but this time I am the defendant. Not my store, me. I swear to God, I look at the documentation, and the only thing that changed was instead of my business's name, mine is listed as the defendant. Same thing happens, 4 weeks later the case is dismissed. Over the next 3 months I was sued just as many times. Before the 5th case's hearing, we had a settlement meeting. My uncle, the judge, the guy suing me, his lawyer, a bailiff, and I were sitting in this room. Judge says, "You two have been in court 4 times already. Is there any way we could come to an agreement that'll stop this cycle of faulty litigation?" The guy's lawyer says they have an offer and hand it to my uncle, who then hands it to me. It essentially read that he'll stop all litigation if I sell my business for about 30% of remaining loan principal. I outright rejected the offer and made a counteroffer. I said, "If you drop this case, I won't sue your ass for harassment." He busts out laughing. "Sue me? With what money? The legal fees alone ought to have drained you. You should be happy I chose to extend this offer and not sue your ass into bankruptcy and buy that shithole from the bank when the foreclose on your dumb ass." The judge, the bailiff, and the guy's own lawyer were all looking at him aghast for saying the silent part out loud about the real reason I was getting sued. My uncle straight out said to him, "Oh, I am sorry, apparently you were never told. I have taken all of my nephew's cases pro bono. The only money he has spent on your litigations is gas. And bluntly, sir, I think your outburst has just ensured a suit against you." After that, we just left, and I was then informed a few days later the litigation was dropped. Right now, my uncle and I are talking about the future suit against the guy. I want to sue the guy for a very high amount to try and get press attention on this guy and his sketchy actions. Although my uncle warned me that we'll need to be careful, because if we set the damages too high, it'll look like we're just being vindictive. This suit won't be pro bono, but after getting sued 5 times for free, essentially, I'm not going to complain. Looking back on this, I am so thankful that my friends and family supported the entire way, especially my uncle. Without my uncle, I would have absolutely lost my business. The next one is an entitled parent story. This happened a year ago. I, 26F at the time in 2021, have only one living paternal grandmother, 90F. Growing up, I tried to bond with her and form an emotional connection, but it turned out that we were not related by blood. I would often be compared to her favorite grandchildren. She would constantly emotionally abuse me, calling me the black sheep of the family, and telling me that I wouldn't succeed in life. This led me to consider ending my own life because she constantly demotivated me. The final straw came when my older brother, 25M, passed away. She told my grieving parents, "Another filthy soul out of this world." My brother was an innocent soul who was killed for simply eating at a fast food restaurant. I snapped at her and said, "The day of your funeral, I'll probably wear the brightest red dress I have in my closet because I will never mourn your loss. In fact, I'll celebrate when that happens." This incident occurred in 2014. Since then, at every family event, I have avoided her or pretended she doesn't exist. I have even skipped attending her birthday parties. So, last November, she got sick and wanted all her children and grandchildren to take care of her in the hospital since her favorite daughter, my aunt, 52F, and her favorite grandchildren, 33F, 31M, and 25F, couldn't do it. She said this to my dad over the phone, and I told her, "Sorry, but my grandparents died in 2004 and 2012, and I don't have any other grandparents since I am not considered a granddaughter by my last living grandparent." She started to cry, or rather, manipulate, and told me that I am her granddaughter, and that this could be a good opportunity to bond and mend our relationship. I responded, "Now I'm your granddaughter? I needed you for 26 years, but in those 26 years you emotionally broke me. I can't do it now since I study and work, and besides, there's no relationship left to save." I hung up on my father before she could say anything. I've been told that I'm a horrible human being for what I said to her, but I don't feel sorry for her at all. She dug her own grave, and now she can lie in it for all I care. That's karma for you. The next one is an entitled people story. Summer had arrived once again, and with the scorching heat, I yearned for relief. This year, I decided to fulfill my long-standing desire for a swimming pool. After weeks of anticipation, my backyard oasis finally stood before me, a magnificent pool that seemed to beckon with promises of relaxation and joy. However, just as life tends to balance its highs with lows, a storm of trouble loomed on the horizon. Within our seemingly idyllic neighborhood, one neighbor stood out like a sore thumb, a relentless Karen whose antics never failed to test the patience of all those around her. Her constant need to assert herself as the community's self-appointed ruler often left us exasperated. Little did I know that my encounter with her would be far from ordinary. One sunny afternoon, I found myself tending to the front yard, meticulously mowing the grass, when Karen halted in front of my house. With an air of entitlement, she approached me, her tone dripping with arrogance. "I noticed you built a swimming pool. When can my children come for a swim?" she demanded, her condescension palpable. Taken aback by her audacity, I responded firmly, "I'm sorry, but the pool is for my family and friends only. Public pools are available nearby, and I suggest you make use of them." But Karen, never one to be deterred, launched into a tirade about the supposed obligations of living in a neighborhood, insisting that I should share my pool with her family. Ignoring her baseless claims, I resumed my task, attempting to drown out her unwelcome presence. The following day, I awoke to a rude awakening, an alarming sight that would leave me speechless. Peering out the window, I witnessed Karen and her children frolicking in my prized pool. Shock coursed through my veins, stealing my breath and igniting a fire within me. Without a moment's hesitation, I burst out of the house, my anger fueling my every step. "What the hell are you doing on my property? Get out!" I shouted, my voice thundering with righteous indignation. Nonchalantly, Karen dismissed my rage, insisting they were almost finished and would leave in 10 minutes. Her deliberate slowness in dressing her children, relishing the chaos she had wrought, sent my heart racing with fury. Seething, I warned her through gritted teeth, "If I ever catch you trespassing on my property again, you'll regret it." In response, she smirked and taunted me with claims of my alleged criminality, asserting her right to use my pool. The encounter left me seething with anger, my mind consumed by thoughts of revenge. Days passed, and I found myself away from home on a work trip, eager to escape the mounting tension. Despite my absence, my pool remained blissfully untouched by Karen's antics, granting me a brief respite from the turmoil. Anticipation grew within me as I longed to return and bask in the cool waters of my sanctuary. Finally, the day of my return arrived, and I approached my house, eager to reclaim what was rightfully mine. As I neared the property, murmurs reached my ears, a cacophony of voices. Unsure whether they originated from my home or a neighboring yard, I cautiously entered my backyard, hoping for a peaceful sight. But to my horror, there she was once again, Karen, accompanied by her offspring, defiling my pool with unabashed audacity. A surge of fury coursed through me, threatening to erupt like a dormant volcano. "Get out now!" I roared, the words laced with a newfound resolve. Unfazed by my rage, Karen brazenly claimed divine rights to my pool, invoking a twisted sense of entitlement. Each syllable she uttered served only to deepen my determination. I approached the pool, ready to physically remove them if necessary. As I advanced, Karen's anger reached its peak, her words twisted and venomous. With an air of finality, she departed, but not without leaving behind a chilling surprise, a pool tainted by bleach, its water rendered toxic and unfit for use. My heart sank as I realized the extent of her malevolence. She had also sabotaged the pool's pump, sealing its fate. In that moment, I made a resolute decision to seek justice. Contacting the authorities, I shared the evidence captured by my home security cameras, determined to bring Karen to account for her trespass and vandalism. Though the outcome fell short of my desires, Karen was forced to pay a hefty fine, a blow to her finances. However, karma, it seemed, had plans of its own. Faced with mounting consequences, Karen chose to sell her house, severing her ties to the neighborhood. The ultimate blow came as she lost custody of her children to her ex-husband, leaving her world shattered. With the proceeds from the house sale, she settled her debt, vanishing into the shadows, her whereabouts unknown. While I harbor no desire to delve into Karen's fate, I find solace in the knowledge that justice was served. The echoes of her insidious actions have gradually faded, leaving me to enjoy the tranquility of my restored pool. And as for my neighbors, free from Karen's oppressive grip, they too can now revel in the harmony that was denied them for so long. The next one is a pro-revenge story. My wife and I decided to go to Southern California for the holidays. We found ourselves a nice resort and checked in. All was well until we noticed that the walls in our room were very thin. As we entered our room, we could hear our next-door neighbor talking and having an argument with his girlfriend. We shared one common wall with them. They were shouting pretty loud and we could hear everything through the wall. We'll refer to this guy as Noisy Neighbor, NN. NN kept fighting with his girlfriend about something she said earlier. We didn't follow, weren't interested, and decided to go eat and explore around the town we were in. We came back around 10 at night and all was quiet. We figured that NN and his girlfriend had already gone to bed, so we went to bed as well. Turns out he was out. NN and his girlfriend came back at 12, laughing and really loud. Loud to the point that we could hear them and hear their entire conversation. Looks like they made up after the fighting that morning. We hear the girlfriend say that she is hungry, and NN calls for pizza delivery. It was there that we heard NN's name, phone number, and credit card info. Not that we would do anything with it. They kept chatting and laughing, and we could hear every bit of their conversation through the thin walls. My wife and I tried earplugs, the radio, and everything we could think of to drown out the noise. We were hoping that they would eventually turn in for the night, and there would be some peace and quiet. Yet NN was full of energy and boyish laughter. Finally, at around 2 a.m., we decided to call the concierge and let the resort security deal with it. The resort we stayed at was meant for mindfulness and meditation, so it did enforce some quiet hours. Security called them up and told them that they were too loud and to keep their voices down. This did the trick for some time and we fell asleep, only to be woken up again at around 5 a.m. to some really loud sex, like moaning and screaming from the girlfriend. After they were done with their business, they washed up and just kept talking. Laying there in bed, I heard all about NN's job, where he was from, where he grew up, his political views, and so on. Finally, at 6 or so, we called up the front desk again. This time, security actually came and knocked on their door to tell them to keep their voices down as it was still officially quiet hours. NN and his girlfriend were furious that they could be disturbed when they were just having fun and having a good time. They claimed that they weren't loud at all, and why can't they just have some fun? They threatened to leave poor reviews for the resort and made sure that all of their friends would hear about this. Security took all that in, gave them their warning, and left. After security left, NN and his GF started talking crap about my wife and me through the wall, knowing that we could hear it. Stuff like, "Our neighbors are such a holes," probably racial slur, yo. "What's wrong with having sex with my GF, huh? Too loud for you pussies?" And just deliberately talked to his GF in a really loud voice, talking about how great the sex was and how she was going to scream and moan louder next time. I was frustrated at this time, with very little sleep. I took out my cell phone and recorded everything that we were hearing, hoping to show the front desk just how little soundproof the room was, and hopefully ask for a room change. But then something happened. At 7 or so, we heard NN's phone ring, and suddenly NN and GF were really silent. Then I heard NN say, "Hi, NN's wife, how are you, sweetie? I just woke up here at the conference, long day ahead, I miss you so much." It turns out NN was cheating on his wife with his mistress over Christmas. At this point, my wife and I hatched a plan. With all the information that we had on NN, his wife's name, and where they lived, we started combing Facebook and yellowpages.com for more information. Lo and behold, we found what NN looked like. an old man in his 50s, and his wife. All the information matched up with what he had been talking about all night, plus his zip code when he ordered pizza. A bit more digging, and we found where Enen's wife worked and her email address. A simple Outlook.com email address later, I compressed the recording I had and sent it to Enen's wife. The best part is that the recording contained Enen's wife's phone call to Enen, so she had no doubt it was definitely Enen. Exhausted with little sleep, my wife and I decided to just get up and go get some breakfast around town. Rachel. We came back a few hours later and stopped by the concierge's desk. We wanted to thank them and their security for trying to help us get some sleep and to ask for another room. Turns out we didn't need a room switch. They checked out this morning a few days earlier than scheduled, the concierge told us. She mentioned something about an urgent family concern that NN had to attend to. Looks like our plan had worked much better than we had hoped for. The rest of our stay at the resort was quiet and uneventful. No one else checked into that room. I did show the front desk parts of my recording just so they know that they need to work on soundproofing their rooms in the future. The next one is a petty revenge story. This happened way back. My daughter is 30 now. When I was 18 and in my first year of college, I got pregnant. The father joined the Navy to escape responsibility. My parents, who are strict conservatives except when it's inconvenient, abandoned me and cut me off financially. They wanted me to have an abortion to prevent the loss of my scholarship. That's how I found myself at 18 suddenly and totally responsible for myself and my living situation, with no financial or emotional support from anyone. I lived at a private dorm and was befriended by the property manager, Donna. When I told her my situation, she swooped in like a hero and helped me get a place to stay at one of the other properties she managed. I was getting evicted from the dorm. She then helped me get a job at a gift shop at one of those properties. I thought she was the most wonderful person for all of this, until her true motives became clear. She wanted to adopt my baby, even though I had expressed no interest in giving my baby up for adoption. After a few weeks of work, she launched a campaign to convince me I was unfit to be a mother and that my baby would be so much better off if I let Donna have it. At first, it was subtle, passive-aggressive remarks about how much money she and her husband had, how she couldn't have children herself, how she hoped she was able to adopt one day, and what a wonderful life they would give their baby. But as time passed, her approach became more aggressive and direct. She was always around the shop and would even come to my apartment, ready to point out things I did or didn't do that proved what a terrible mother I would be. She went into long rants about how awful I was for having a baby without a father, how we'd be welfare trash forever, how God brought her into my life because she was meant to have my baby. It was endless and constant for months. Sometimes I let her comments upset me and make me wonder if she was right, but in my heart, I knew that I'd be a good mother. For a while, feeling intimidated, I let myself be bullied into including her in baby-related events. I even let her go with me to the sonogram where I found out my baby was a girl. She was so excited for me. As I got closer to delivering, I got stronger in making it clear to Donna that I was not giving up my baby. I tried to avoid Donna as much as I could, but was regularly reminded of how much power she had over my living situation. I soon had coworkers telling me she was claiming that my baby's adoption was a done deal. She even told people she was decorating a nursery and buying baby girl clothes. When it became clear that she was not going to change my mind, she started threatening me with eviction from my apartment and firing me from my job. That way I'd realize how unstable my situation was and recognize I had no business having a baby, and sure enough, I lost my job. She fired me for not wearing my shoes behind the cashier's counter at the gift shop. When I was on my feet all day, my feet would swell right out of my shoes. I'd stay behind the counter and slip off my shoes for a bit, but never in view of the customers. Still, that was reason enough in Donna's mind to teach me a lesson. It didn't take long after losing my job to also lose my apartment. I ended up couch surfing and even spent some time homeless until I got some housing assistance. In the meantime, I had gone to the EEOC and complained, and they helped me mediate with the owners of the gift shop property. As a result, Donna got fired from managing that property, and I got months of back pay and some extra money for my trouble, in exchange for not full-out suing them. This small cash windfall turned out to be a huge blessing that actually enabled me to survive financially until I had my baby and could get back to school. Donna firing me was the best thing that could have ever happened. I saw her years later and she was still childless. Best revenge. My daughter is now getting ready to graduate. Full scholarship and magna cum laude from a top law school. Turns out being raised by a single mom is not as awful as Donna thought. The next one is an entitled people story. So, I work the graveyard shift as a security guard for a small private company, and one of the places I have worked security for was at 2 hotels. One thing I try to do while I am at work is to be respectful and give someone the benefit of the doubt, especially when there is supposedly only one witness to something going on. I also try to be as respectful as I can be, even when the person or people I am dealing with are being uncooperative and belligerent. One of the things I do when I first get on shift is to talk to the front desk of the first hotel I would guard and see if they need anything before I begin my patrols for the night. And I always check in with the front desk as often as I can so they know I'm there to help if needed. I then walk over to the second hotel and do the same thing. Most of the time they ask me to go to a room and knock to let the guests know they are being a little too loud and that there is a noise complaint, and the guest usually apologizes and then quiets down for the night. This night in question, I had to deal with 3 entitled parents. One thing about the hotel is that the lobby closes to the public at 9 p.m., so any large gatherings are prohibited from continuing at that time, and that is when I start work. I grab a radio so the hotels can contact me at any moment they need security. I walk from the first hotel after letting them know that I am on duty and make my way over to the second hotel and do the same thing. When I check in with the front desk of the second hotel, the clerk behind the desk asks if I could talk to a group of adults who have been drinking and are getting very loud. I calmly and respectfully tell them that they can continue their party in their rooms, but they have to vacate the lobby as it is officially closed for the night. The clerk at the front desk tells me that she has tried to get them to quiet down and leave the lobby for the past 10 minutes. Yet they complain that as guests, they are entitled to stay in the lobby. They complain that the hotel has gotten security involved and complain on their way back to the rooms but leave the lobby. I begin my patrols when I get a call less than 30 minutes later at the same hotel because someone has complained that children are running in the halls. The hotel is currently hosting a sports event and many kids from the sports teams are there. The clerk behind the front desk has me meet her in the lobby and we go to the room we believe the children are in. When I see the kids, they say that they have all been outside until a moment ago when they came back to the room, which I can verify is true. The kids then say that they have seen 2 kids that appear to be twins running through the hallways. The clerk leans back and gives an exhausted sigh and tells me that she has heard all day about those 2 kids, and she believes that the parents are in the group that has been kicked out of the lobby earlier. I walk around the hotel to see if I can find the room the kids are in and am stopped by hotel maintenance and told that they have seen those kids running away from the floor I am on and that the fire retardant cases are all open and one appears to have been kicked in and is badly dented. I spot the 2 kids in question and they immediately go back to their room at a running pace when they spot me. I find out what room they are in and report everything to the clerk before going to the first and second floor to find out if any more damage has happened. A guest tells me that they saw 2 twins running around the second floor, and I find all of the cases open except one that has been broken. It is missing the handle and the glass is cracked. I go to the lobby and show the pictures of all the damage done, and the clerk calls her manager directly at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night. For those who don't know, most hotel management is never in on the weekends. The manager says that these kids and their parents need to leave immediately and charges the room for all damages done to the hotel. I wait until 10:30 p.m. to go to the room, hoping that the parents will be back in the room. I go up to the room and knock on the door, and one of the kids responds. The encounter goes as follows. OP, hello, I am security for the hotel. Are your parents in the room? Entitled kid. No. OP, can you tell me where your parents are? Entitled kid, in another room. OP, can you tell me what room they are in? The entitled kid tells me what room the parents are in, and I immediately tell the children to contact their parents and have them meet me at the room. As soon as the door closes, I step away from the door but keep it in immediate view and contact the front desk and ask the clerk to wait with me, since we are dealing with minors and for safety reasons for all parties involved. and don't want to deal with the he was harassing us for no reason and stalking us all night crap. The parents take 15 minutes to come to the room as they expect me to leave the floor the children are on, and I am afraid they will run to another room and break more stuff on the way. The first thing that happens is the entitled father starts yelling at me. Entitled father: "What are you doing creeping outside of our children's room?" OP: "Hello, I am a security officer with the hotel. I was asked to speak with you as your children have been accused of breaking hotel property." Friend of entitled parents: "So you thought you would harass young boys? Do you get off on doing that or something?" OP: "Sir, your children have been accused of breaking hotel property, and because of the risk of them supposedly doing this again, my job here is to protect this hotel from such things. Your children are considered a threat to the safety of the hotel." Entitled father: "You have no right to be outside of their room. You should have come to speak to us at our room, not be a creep and stand outside their room like a pervert." OP: "Sir, they are classified as a threat with the accusations of the destruction of private property. As it stands, the hotel managers have made it clear that you are no longer guests here and you must leave the property immediately." Entitled mother: "You have no proof that our children are behind this. They have behaved perfectly and they have been in their rooms all night. Unfortunately, as they keep trying to yell and talk over me, I am beginning to get irritated and am losing my polite attitude and starting to become that extreme a-hole security guard with the cop attitude that no one wants to deal with." OP: "That's bullcrap. I have hotel staff that has seen them outside of their room. I have guests in the hotel that have seen them outside of their room, and I have personally seen that they have been outside of their room." Entitled mother: "Everyone else is lying and personally targeting our children, including you. There are many children here that could be the culprits behind these accusations, but you are just choosing to blame everything on our children." OP: "I don't care if you believe me or not. You need to leave the property immediately." At this moment, the entitled father gets directly in my face and says, "I don't have to do anything you say, and we are not leaving. I work for the FBI." I look at him and demand he shows me his federal credentials proving that he is part of the FBI. The state that I live and work in states that if you identify as a member of local or federal law enforcement or as a federal employee, you have to show your credentials, even if you live in another state. The entitled father says he doesn't have to until I tell him about this exact same law. He then tells me that he left them in the room and needs to get them. When I am able to confirm that they don't want to leave, I calmly walk back to the hotel lobby, but not before the entitled friend says, "Go ahead and leave, you pervert. You know you are wrong and that you have nothing to prove." As soon as I am in the elevator, I get on the radio with another clerk at the front desk and tell them to call the local sheriff's department and tell her the entire encounter and explain that they are now trespassing on hotel property. While the clerk is on the phone, the night auditor comes in and I brief him on what is going on. The entitled father comes down and begins demanding the hotel give the family a full refund or they are not leaving and that they can't do anything as he is FBI. He unfortunately severely scares the two clerks that are still on shift and makes the night auditor nervous with this, and I tell them to let law enforcement know that the man is claiming this, and that I now fear he has a weapon on the property. Thankfully, they go back to their rooms after realizing that the hotel will not budge, and they stay in their rooms for the rest of the night. I check all the hallways just in case, but thankfully they remain clear for the rest of my shift. Law enforcement shows up around 3 in the morning, and when I explain everything to them, they become guarded, especially now that I said I fear the man is FBI and may have a weapon on the property that is not registered in the hotel database. Law enforcement says that they can take the family away as they are trespassing, but there is little that can be done. The parents tell the officers that I have not talked to the parents, nor has the hotel spoken to them about anything. The entitled father and his friend start demanding information from the hotel about the clerks involved and all of my work information. I tell them I'm not allowed to legally give out any of my work information outside of the name of my work. It isn't true, but the guy believes it and says he will contact my work and make sure my superiors hear about me and how I am a creep. The rest of the night is uneventful, and the entitled family stays in their rooms, but that's because they don't want to leave. And the night auditor is a nice guy and doesn't want to kick the children out at 4 in the morning with nowhere else to go. Since the kids of these entitled parents are connected to a sports group and there are about 10 to 15 rooms all connected under the group, the hotel decides to charge each room with the destruction of property and attaches a report from both hotel staff that has been written and myself to make sure it is known why each room is charged over $500 in damages. One of the fun things about that night is that one of the sheriffs that shows up is a friend from high school that I haven't seen in over 10 years. It is nice to catch up with him and see that he is doing well. The next one is an entitled people story. It had been a tumultuous journey living next to my neighbor, an individual who seemed to thrive on disregarding boundaries and asserting his dominance over everything in sight. From trespassing on my property to commandeering parking spots, he reveled in a twisted sense of entitlement. However, my patience had reached its limit, and I was determined to teach him a lesson in respect. As fortune would have it, circumstances aligned in my favor when my work shifted to a remote setting, granting me an opportunity to witness my neighbor's comings and goings throughout the day. Each time he left the vicinity, I swiftly relocated my car to a spot precisely between our houses. It was a subtle yet deliberate act to convey the significance of sharing public parking spaces. Predictably, my neighbor was infuriated by my actions. He stormed towards me, his face twisted with anger and frustration. "Neighbor, you're parked in my spot again." Me. "There are no designated spots. It's street parking available to all residents. This has been made clear to you before." Neighbor. "You have no respect for my property." Me. "I am not on your property, unlike you, who continuously trespasses on mine without permission. If you expect respect, you should extend the same courtesy by staying off my lawn." Hoping that my message would finally resonate with him, I retreated indoors. Unfortunately, what ensued surpassed any expectation of escalation. From inside my home, I heard an ominous and unmistakable sound: a chainsaw. Rushing outside, I was greeted by a horrifying sight. My neighbor brandishing a chainsaw, its teeth biting into my car's driver's side door. Glass shattered, seats were shredded, and even the gear shift met a brutal fate. To my disbelief, he wore a chilling smile throughout the destructive act, relishing in his deranged actions. Onlookers gathered, their fear preventing them from intervening as he posed an immediate threat with the menacing chainsaw. Fortunately, someone had the presence of mind to summon the police. The authorities swiftly arrived, ordering my neighbor to cease his destructive spree and place the chainsaw on the ground. Complying reluctantly, he was promptly apprehended and taken away in the back of a police car. The evidence against him was overwhelming, leaving him no choice but to plead guilty to his wanton act of vandalism. Ultimately, justice prevailed as he was sentenced to a year in jail and compelled to compensate me for the damages inflicted upon my car. Despite the potential for parole, I remained vigilant, safeguarding myself and my property by obtaining a restraining order against him. With his impending release, I could breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that he would no longer reside beside me. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I grew up on a country road with 4 houses. Our mailboxes were on the main road. Someone kept vandalizing the 4 mailboxes by driving through them and breaking the posts. I recall replacing the mailboxes a few times on weekends. After 4 to 5 times, my dad and the neighbors hatched a plan. My dad told me to go to bed early because we had a lot of work to do in the morning. After breakfast, we went to the mailbox, and there were the other 3 neighbors and their sons, along with a tractor with a post hole digger, railroad ties, cement, and a mini mixer. We proceeded to dig 2 very deep holes. Digging holes was very backbreaking where I lived, as the land was in a very rocky region. We only dug about 6 inches before we had to dig out a bunch of rocks from the hole. We took turns digging out the rocks throughout the entire morning. There was a lot of motivation, as this was the last time we were going to fix the mailboxes. We dug 2 holes, each 6 feet deep, and hoisted 2 uncut 12-foot railroad ties into each hole. We then proceeded to fill each hole to the top with cement. We added a crossbeam and attached our new mailboxes. After an entire day of digging holes and pouring concrete, we all sat back and enjoyed our handiwork. A month went by, and the kids and I walked to the mailbox to meet the bus. We discovered what happens when a moving car meets an immovable object. There was an old blue Buick Century with a smashed-up grille and a bent wheel, and nobody in the car. This was well before cell phones, so we ran to the closest house and told the mom what we saw. We went back to the main road and got on the bus with the car still there. We found out later that the highway ticketed the driver, A 14-year-old kid and towed the vehicle. Now, where I grew up, you could get a daytime driver's license at 14. One catch: if you received 2 violations over 2 years, you lost your license until you turned 16 years old. The kid was ticketed for speeding a week prior. Oops, he now lost his license for 1.5 years. Insurance found out about the vandalism and refused to pay the claim, then put the insurance plan in the high-risk category, even when the kid couldn't drive. The kid's dad tried to fight it by saying the mailboxes were not legally built. Turns out mailbox construction is set by the state and county, and our state county did not have any regulations on county mailboxes. I smile every time I go home. After 30 years, the indestructible mailboxes are still standing. The next one is a petty revenge story. My child's daycare had a death in the family. It's a small family-owned place, so this affected all the employees. They sent out an email at around 3 a.m. I couldn't miss work as I had a very important day, so I scrambled to find a sitter just for that day. My stepbrother's girlfriend was basically the only person I know who doesn't work, so I called her. She said, "Sure, but I can only watch him for 6 hours and I'll give you my family rate, so it will only be $200. I asked if she was serious. She assured me she was, and that this was her livelihood, and she takes it very seriously. That she was already offering me a family discount. Please note that it was not her livelihood. My stepbrother has a great job and has always paid for everything. He has tried to get her to do anything to earn money, but she refuses to work and believes he should support her fully, including daily Starbucks, hair, nails, designer stuff, etc. Please also note that I had done a lot for this girl, just to help her out. The list is long. I agreed only because I would have lost my job if I hadn't gone to work that day. I paid her $200, which she demanded up front, to work for a little over 4 hours after factoring in the commute. Fast forward a couple of years. They have separated, they have a kid, and she is living for free in his dad's extra house, and driving my dad's extra car for free. The ex pays all the bills and necessities. She finally breaks down and gets a job because he stopped paying for her hair, nails, etc. She has a day when her childcare falls through and sends out the same request I did. "Can anyone watch my kid? I have to go to work or I'll get fired." I told her I could absolutely do it. Then I charged her the same bogus price she charged me. I told her it was the family rate. She cussed me out. Edit. Why would either of us get fired has been asked a ton. Here's why. I was scheduled to teach a seminar for about 400 people. This was extremely expensive to the company once you factor in all the logistics of closing operations for a day, etc. If I had last minute canceled, it would have cost them twice as much. Under normal circumstances, I can miss work for an emergency, but not during something like that. I'm a salaried employee, so I usually work about 60 hours a week. Taking off after lunch or something isn't a big deal. It was just the magnitude of the event. She worked a job that anyone was qualified for and was on the chopping block for missing work all the time. Also, it was not her livelihood. At some point before she got with my stepbrother, she was babysitting for a family for a couple of weeks, but they fired her for being unreliable. She recognized the position I was in and threw out a number because she knew I had no choice but to pay it. The next one is an entitled people story. Not me, thankfully, but a good friend. He had come into some money, so after setting aside a college fund for his kids, he's divorced. He decided to buy himself a toy in the form of a new Tesla SUV. Even though charging stations are popping up everywhere, he decided to install one in his garage so he wouldn't have to go all over the place. He got the station installed, got his car, and life went on. Enter one of his neighbors, whom we'll call, I don't know. Karen and her hubby had an older model Tesla and, like most people, used the public chargers for their car. One day my friend came home to find Karen angrily trying to open his garage door. When he somewhat politely asked what the hell she was doing, she told him she needed to use the public charging station for her car, and that he was illegally blocking her access by keeping his garage door locked. When he told her that the charger was his personal one, she angrily rebuked him by saying that all Tesla chargers were public property, and that he was breaking the law by blocking his. I actually checked on this. And a home Tesla charging station only costs a few grand. He politely told her to F off, put his car in the garage, and close the door. A little while later, there was a knock on the door, and he opened it to find a cop with a smug-looking Karen standing behind him. The cop explained that he was responding to a blocking access to public property complaint. It took him a second, but then he took the cop, who seemed embarrassed to be there, to his garage, showed him his car and the charger, and showed him the invoice for the charging station. The cop nodded, went outside, had a conversation with Karen, who screeched something unintelligible. End of story, right? Well, one day my friend comes home to find his garage door half bashed in to the point he can't open the damn thing. He then does what any normal person would. He looked at the security feed from the cameras he had for his house. And there, in HD, was Karen psychotically hammering at his garage door with a small sledge. He calls the cops, and Karen is hauled out of her home and is facing charges of attempted break and enter and damaging private property. Oh, and my friend is suing her for damages to his home, just to plug in her damn car. The next one is an entitled parent story. I, 27F, got into it with my mother today, and I don't think our relationship will ever be the same after this one. To be honest, our relationship has always been rocky for years, but I tried to make it better after moving out a few years ago. We got into it because my niece, 13, came out as a lesbian, and she was mad because, well, to be honest, my mom's a homophobe, which got worse after I moved out because she became excessively religious. I said something like, "Oh, well, it is what it is," when she told me, and she did not like that. She started going on and on about how, no, it's not. It's the devil working in her, and I can't bring myself to see her again. That shocked me because I knew how my mom is, but to just disown her only grandchild like that struck a nerve with me. I then said, "So just because niece is who she is, you want to not see her again? You've been in her life since birth. How could you?" She then skipped over that and said something like, "Well, I'm mad because I told her that's not how we are in the family. And your sister pissed me off because, well, you and your sister are pissing me off because you're acting like this isn't a big deal. Niece isn't gay. She just thinks that because of something she saw on social media." She then went on to talk about how God made men for women and vice versa, saying that we're letting the devil work in our lives. I then said, God made us all in his image, right? If homosexuality was something he didn't agree with at all, then he should be able to make it so it wasn't a thing, right? She tried to say that it was the devil, but I cut her off with, "So you're saying that someone who devotes themselves to God, prays every day, worships and praises him in his name, is still letting the devil work through them? People don't choose to be gay, lesbian, etc. And niece is no different. She's still niece, and her preference and attraction don't change that. TBU ahead. Brief talk of thoughts of suicide." Then my mom said this, and it just hit that nerve that I tried to ignore for years. "I'm your mother. You are who I tell you to be." Why did this strike a nerve? Well, my mother has been controlling over me for years. Growing up, it was on and off, but when I became an adult, she kicked it into full gear. Yelling at me, making me do things, controlling my money, not letting me drive, not letting me go anywhere, hitting me. And basically did everything she could to make me feel like I was the size of a rice grain. Hell, just the other day she told me how I was different because I didn't ask permission to move out, unlike my sister that asked, which I doubt by the way. I was 23, engaged, and tired of getting treated like I was nothing under her roof. So my husband and his mom helped me by moving me in with them. I can honestly say that if I stayed any longer, I would have probably taken my own life. That one statement made me realize that my mom wasn't just absent-mindedly controlling, she was fully in control of making me feel like an object. I don't know how to explain it, but it just made me feel worse. She then said, "If this is how you're gonna be, then I don't want to talk to you ever again either." So I took a deep breath and said, "Well, if it's like that, then I should tell you that I've been bisexual since I was 12 years old, and that never changed." She lost her crap. She hung up and texted me, my sister, and my niece in a group chat, actual copy and paste. "You three can just come over and stick a knife in my heart. Really, are you all trying to kill me? I'm so hurt right now." My sister said not to bring my niece into this chat, and then Mom continued, "The devil is so busy, but keep on entertaining him. Listen, niece's mommy, I don't give a flying duck." There was some more, but she messaged me privately and told me to leave her alone, and this is where I'm at now. So yeah, I came out to support my niece, and honestly, it felt good to stand up for myself for once. My anxiety is going crazy at the moment, but I don't regret what I said or did. Unfortunately, I'm sure my mom will die on this hill. Small update. Mom seems to have calmed down a little, but the first thing she texted me was a scripture and told me to repent, which was expected. I decided not to poke the bull, so I was honest as I wanted to be. I told her that I can say without a drop of doubt that God is pleased with me. Note, I'm not traditionally religious, but more or less a spiritualist. I basically believe that there's a little truth in all beliefs, even atheism, because I have been blessed with joy that I haven't felt until after I moved away. I told her how I loved her, but I was afraid of her for most of my life, to the point that I couldn't come to her for anything, due to the fear of her reaction. She then did the classic parent speech of how I was fed and clothed, and how I should be grateful because she didn't kill any of us by being a mean mother, and tried to justify her hitting and yelling at me by trying to make sure that I didn't ruin my life. Let me just say that I wasn't a classic rebellious child or teenager. She said that I was messy and always forgetful with things, so I guess that warranted a slap and getting choked. Never mind that I was going through mental health struggles at that point in time and all that, I guess. But she never had an answer for when I was grown and had a job and was doing the right thing and still getting slapped for who knows what reason. I know for a fact that if I were in her presence, I'd be getting my ass beat and not this we need to pray attitude. I'm going to go talk to my sister and niece now to see what they are up to, and if they are okay. The next one is an entitled Parents' Story. When I was 17, I bought a used mini bike and used it to get to and from a part-time job. Those who've read my previous posts know what my little brother is like. The boy my parents extra coddled because he was diagnosed as high-functioning autistic, and anything I had, my brother had to have too. And if I refused to give it, my parents generally took it. At least until that behavior was exposed to the public when my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday. After that, my parents stopped forcing me to give my stuff to my brother whenever he wanted it. And that led to some extra huge tantrums from him. My brother would look for things around the house to throw to the floor and break, usually dishes. My parents actually stocked up on plates from secondhand stores because of that. When I got the mini bike, my brother was upset I would never let him ride it. But he's destructive with all his stuff. Every time he broke his BMX, I'm the one who had to fix it. Change a flat, new pedals, a new tire, new handlebars, a new brake line, etc. He's got a stunt BMX that he begged for, and my parents spent hundreds on it. But as much as he loves it, he never fixes it himself or properly takes care of it. He just calls me over, begging me to fix it. My parents got him the parts and have the tools, but he never bothers to do anything more than pump up a tire. And even then, he usually tries to get someone to do it for him. He's also very careless about where he leaves the bike. He left it in a neighbor's driveway and its handlebars got run over by the neighbor's van. He somehow destroyed the pedals and a new pair had to be put on. He broke the rear brake line while having a tantrum too. The tire was understandable though, since those wear out. But it wasn't hard to swap it, and I shouldn't have had to come over on a Saturday to do it when my brother is perfectly capable of doing it himself. So damn right I'm not letting him take my mini bike on a joyride, especially with gas prices being so high these days. The mini bike gets like 60 mpg, so what that it only goes 40 miles per hour, I only have a 5-mile commute anyway. About a month before my brother's 14th birthday, my parents called me, begging me to come over and fix the BMX again. Little bro had worn the rear tire down to its threads. I was annoyed, but I came over anyway because they offered to pay me. I swapped the tire and sat down for a bottled water because it was like 100 degrees that day. My brother watched me work on the bike until I was done. His helmet was on, so I figured he was just waiting to go riding on his bike. But the moment my back was turned, I heard my mini bike start up outside and then take off. Little bro took off like a rocket down the street on it before I could get out of the garage. I freaked out, but my parents tried to play it off. Though when I didn't placate them, they said they'd get my mini bike back right away. But for them, that was more like just waiting till my brother came back with it. I was annoyed and I wanted to call the police, but I'm not sure if they'd call it a domestic issue or not. My brother finally came back an hour later. He'd somehow not crashed. But the moment he saw me, he took off again. He drove the bike till it ran out of gas, and my parents had to go get him. To say I was furious was an understatement. But my parents basically rolled their eyes, handed me $40, and claimed it wouldn't happen again. I said it better not, or I'd call the cops next time. Not sure if it'd help, but they seemed to take my warning. I had to push my mini bike to the nearest gas station to fill up before I could go home. Before I left, I told my parents that if my brother wants a mini bike so bad, then they should get him one. But then they pulled a 180 and said he wasn't ready to have one because it's a big responsibility, and that it was too dangerous because it's practically a motorcycle. I mean, really. They just let him steal mine for like 2 hours to go joyriding to God knows where, and they don't want to get him one themselves? Whatever. I'm used to their hypocrisy by now. The last time I went to my parents' house, my brother was massively grounded and in his room for his birthday rampage I mentioned in my first post. But just to be sure, I pulled the spark plug wire off my bike before I entered the house. My brother was glaring at me from his window when I left. I just gave him a goofy wave and drove off. The next one is an entitled people story, so for context, my sister's ex-boyfriend, let's call him NB for nice brother, and the father of her child passed away a couple of years ago. This story takes place at the funeral. Our families were very close, given that he was the father of my niece. Even though they broke up and my sister got married to someone else, we all cared for and valued him a lot. Now onto the entitled person. At the funeral, we were all sitting down when all of a sudden this lady pops up, runs to the casket that's about to be lowered, and starts bawling. It wasn't weird at this point since a lot of people were crying, but she was screaming. I didn't question it too much, but I did find it a little odd since I'd never seen her before. Fast forward to later in the funeral. The ceremony was done and we were all talking. My other sister, not the one who dated NB's sister, and I were having a conversation. I'm good friends with NB's sister since we're the same age and have the same interests. This will be important later. Suddenly we hear the entitled lady, EL, the one sobbing on his casket and causing a scene, talking to a friend of hers. Out of nowhere she says, "Yeah, I was actually going to get married to NB and take NB's kid from my sister, and we were going to move far, far away and live together." My sister and I exchanged a look that said, "What in the actual duck?" We had never seen her, and given how close we were with his family, we were shocked to hear this. I then asked NB's sister what she was talking about, and she said, funnily enough, "I've never seen that woman in my life. All I know is she was his co-worker, and they barely talked. He was actually often annoyed by her constantly trying to ask him out. All in all, she was outcast by everyone there, including NB's family, for lying about their late family member." Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.